is Katrina.
Number 10. The Island of the Lepers. Spinalonga is a small and barren island of barely 85 acres in Greece. And although the island is small and appears to be completely empty, that's not the case. Preserved on this mysterious island is a dark and daunting past. In fact, locals call it the Island of the Lepers. The history of the island starts around 1526, when Spinalonga wasn't an island at all. It was part of the peninsula of Elunda, but the land was shattered to create an island. The Venetians wished to create a fortification that could defend the port city of Olus. Due to the natural salt flats nearby, Olus was suddenly a very wealthy city with high commercial value. The Venetians maintained control over the island until 1715, and for those short 200 years, Spinalonga was one of the most powerful sea fortresses anywhere in the world. But then the Ottomans showed up and conquered the small island. The Turks then had control of it until 1903, which was when it was returned to Greece. But then came the leper community. Hidden among the ruins of the medieval fortress are the lost bones of lepers shunned from society. Between 1903 and 1957, Spinalonga was used to house people afflicted with leprosy. It was one of the final active leper colonies in Europe, with an estimated 400 lepers living on it at one time during the 60-year outbreak. It might make for a neat story now, but it was absolutely horrific. During its early years as a leper colony, the island had no infrastructure. People were sent there to literally wait for death. There was no running water, no food, and nothing but the harsh sun and bitter seawater. People were even misdiagnosed and sent to Spinalonga for suffering minor afflictions like rashes. Nobody wanted to take their chances with this disease. Number 9. Filet Temple. The small island of Filet in Egypt is less than 450 feet wide, and yet it's been capturing the imagination of travelers for thousands of years. It was once called the Pearl of Egypt and was known across the Mediterranean for its tall palm trees, lush green plants, and marvelous temples. It's on this mysterious island where colonnades and sanctuaries once dominated the skyline, giving all those who visited an intriguing sense of mystery. These days, the temples have mostly been repaired, but some are still in ruins. Regardless, the island of Philae is a major tourist destination. The island was the center for the cult of Isis starting around 664 BC. The descendants of Ptolemy, Alexander the Great's general who took control of Egypt following his death in the 4th century BC, built more temples later on. They wanted to please the Egyptians, which in turn helped them secure their rule over the region. They did this by building temples dedicated to the locals' favorite gods and goddesses. The temple to Osiris was built on the nearby island of Bige, and Horus had his own temple on Philae. The island also had a temple to Imhotep, the revered architect of Pharaoh Dozer's step pyramid in Saqqara, whom the Egyptians later deified as a god of medicine. Number 8. Ancient Greek sailors. New archaeological evidence is suggesting that primitive humans took to the seas much earlier than previously thought. It might seem impressive that early people paddled their boats to somewhere like the Channel Islands 13,000 years ago. But what this new discovery suggests is that people were already doing that 450,000 years ago in the Aegean Sea. However, they weren't technically Homo sapiens. Instead, scientists from the University of Patras in Greece say they were members of a different hominin species called Homo erectus. The primitive hominins figured out how to make boats nearly 500,000 years ago. Then they used them to travel throughout the Aegean Islands between Greece and Turkey. The evidence is based on multiple discoveries made in the Aegean Islands. Archaeologists uncovered prehistoric tools that match perfectly with tools created by the Homo erectus. Scientists refer to them as part of the Achillean tool industry, which was invented by the Homo erectus almost 2 million years ago. There's only two possible explanations for how the tools ended up on the Greek islands. It's possible that the islands may have been part of the mainland, meaning the water level was significantly lower. But if that's not the case, the ape-like hominins must have carved boats with their stone tools and sailed to the islands themselves. What do you think about that? And now for number 8. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Tajui Khan for the super thanks. This is so helpful for us to keep making more videos and creating more fun things for everybody, so big thank you. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join us for more videos about mysterious discoveries and strange history. Number 7. Earthquake Island. A devastating earthquake rocked the coast of Pakistan in 2013. When that happened, an island made entirely of mud rose up from the waters as a new landmass. Then, after just 6 years, the mysterious earthquake island suddenly vanished. The earthquake of 2013 was joined by the eruption of a mud volcano. When the Arabian tectonic plate rubbed itself against the Eurasian plate, intense pressure caused buried mud to liquefy and bubble to the surface. The mud moved so quickly it carried rocks and boulders with it like an upside-down avalanche. All these rocks ended up on the surface, forming a 65-foot-tall island, measuring 295 feet wide and 130 feet long. Scientists named it Zalzala Koh, which translates to Earthquake Mountain in the Urdu language. The earthquake that created the island was catastrophic, resulting in over 320 deaths and displacing thousands of people. Absolutely nothing good came of it except the new island, which scientists found fascinating. But now, according to NASA, the whole thing is gone. Satellite images show the material that made up the island eroded so quickly that it started to shrink immediately after it was created. Now, Zalzala Koh is a thing of the past, but it's a great example of just how quickly things on this turbulent planet can change. Number 6. Suakin Island Ruins. On the island of Suakin in Sudan, there are the remains of an abandoned city built entirely from coral. For an amazing 3,000 years, the port city was a strategic tool for powerful empires. Because the island of Suakin was situated in northern Sudan on the tip of the Red Sea, it was the perfect place to transport goods to Africa and Arabia. The islanders here made a fortune, and Suakin quickly developed into a wealthy island port. And amazingly, everything in this city was built using coral from the local sea and other parts of the world. The port city was originally founded by none other than Egyptian pharaoh Ramses III in the 10th century BC. It was a faraway base the Egyptians used for trading and exploration. Over 1,000 years later, the island was occupied by Islamic followers that decided to leave the Hijaz region of Saudi Arabia. It soon became an important outlet for Africans on their way to Mecca. The mysterious island city continued to evolve and prosper, bringing great wealth to the various rulers of Sudan. One king from ancient legends supposedly had 360 wives and lived in a grand palace somewhere inside the city. Suakin was apparently one of the most majestic cities in the early medieval world. Every building was made from colorful coral, and walls were decorated with stone carvings and fancy wood. But in the 19th century, things took a turn for the worse. The island became a hub for the slave trade in eastern Africa and soon fell into disrepair. By the 1920s, there was very little trade left, and the coral buildings had disintegrated. Today, only the ruins of a magnificent city still exist, but the port still serves ferries on their way to the Saudi coast, and it continues to provide access between the continents for pilgrims who complete the Hajj every year. Number 5. The Channel Islands. During investigations in the Channel Islands National Park, archaeologists discovered a new Native American site. Workers with the National Park Service were conducting routine monitoring on Santa Rosa Island off the coast of California when they made this shocking find. As you may already know, the Channel Islands make up one of the most important ancient sites in North America. Researchers believe humans migrated to the remote islands between 8,000 and 13,000 years ago. That's based on previous discoveries of early human Paleolithic activity. According to John Erlandson from the University of Oregon, the mysterious settlement appears to be 10,000 years old. Scientists believe a group of people migrated from Northeast Asia to the Americas, making them some of the first residents of the New World. And eventually, they made their home on Santa Rosa Island. This new discovery is nothing short of amazing. Archaeologists uncovered stone tools and early examples of hunting and fishing technology. These tools were wielded by the earliest ancestors of North America's indigenous people. These hunters rested and relaxed on the balmy California island thousands of years before any major civilization even existed. Number 4. Giant Fossilized Tree. A giant fossilized tree has been found by researchers with the Museum of Natural History in Greece. On the picturesque island of Lesbos, museum workers dug up an ancient tree complete with its branches and roots. The rather unusual discovery is rare, so rare in fact that nothing like it has been found in almost 3 decades. The tree was discovered in a petrified forest on the island, one of the most densely populated places in the world for fossilized tree trunks. Researchers believe the petrified forest was formed following a string of volcanic eruptions that occurred around 20 million years ago. A huge portion of the island was covered in lava and ash, and much of the vegetation became preserved. It's a truly amazing place because millions of years ago, plant life in the Mediterranean was very different than it is today. The petrified plants found here are vastly different from modern vegetation. And while there has been a lot of logs and plant fossils found, an entire tree is practically unheard of. Nikos Zoros, the director of the museum, says that every part of the tree is still covered in fine volcanic materials. Unfortunately, that's all we know right now. Researchers need a bit more time to do chemical analysis before they can determine the species of the tree and any other interesting details. Number 3. Plymouth. In 1997, the Caribbean island of Montserrat was covered in ash and lava. It was a catastrophic event that saw 2/3 of the island blanketed in volcanic debris. The areas that were affected became exclusion zones, and the ancient town of Plymouth is now a modern-day Pompeii. The Soufriere Hills volcano erupted suddenly and violently after being dormant for centuries. Prior to the eruption, Montserrat was home to many celebrities' favorite resorts. There were many nice places stretching out from Plymouth along the beautiful tropical coastline. But in 1989, Hurricane Hugo decimated Plymouth and the luxury resorts. And then the volcano exploded, leaving everything in ruins. Plymouth is now a half-buried disaster, resembling the victim of an atomic bomb. Nobody is allowed to go there, and you can only look at the town from outside the exclusion zone using binoculars. The town of Plymouth was apparently established at the very base of the volcano, suggesting that its original founders weren't thinking much about future eruptions. So much volcanic ash rained down on the city that the courthouse was buried all the way up to its ceiling. The most recent eruption was in 2013, so it's unlikely that humans will be allowed back into Plymouth anytime soon. Number 2. Stolen human remains. Mysterious human remains are hidden inside metal cabinets in the warehouse of a museum that belongs to the Smithsonian Institution. These remains were uncovered from burial sites on the remote Aleutian Islands almost a century ago. After spending nearly 10 decades as specimens in a museum, the human remains will be transported back to the island to be buried by its current inhabitants. According to Crystal Dushkin, the mayor of the village of Atka, those remains belong to her ancestors. The small village of Atka only has about 70 residents, which isn't surprising given its isolation. After all, the Aleutian Islands are situated between the eastern edge of Russia and the Alaskan mainland. These islands are home to some extremely ancient sites and have been occupied by people for an estimated 9,000 years, though not continuously. The indigenous islanders were forced from their villages by the Russians in the 1700s, and then again in World War II by the Japanese. The Smithsonian Museum has about 175 specimens stolen from burials across 11 islands. The looting took place in the 1930s when this guy showed up and started taking bones from graves. He made some pretty big contributions to the world of archaeology, but his grave robbing hasn't given him the best reputation. The good news is that after all these years, the remains of their ancestors will hopefully be returned to their original graves. Number 1. The Labyrinth of the Minotaur. There is a disused stone quarry on the mysterious Greek island of Crete with an elaborate system of subterranean tunnels. Archaeologists are now saying these tunnels could be the original labyrinth from the Greek myth of Theseus and the Minotaur. According to Greek legend, the wife of the Minoan king Minos gave birth to a gruesome creature that was half man and half bull. The monster was called the Minotaur. It was such an abhorrent beast that the king locked it in a grand labyrinth near his palace. Every few years, the king fed the Minotaur sacrifices of young men and women from Greece. Then the hero Theseus finally cut its head off. The question is, how real is this myth? According to a team of scholars, the labyrinth may have really existed. We already know the ruins of the palace at Knossos likely belonged to King Minos. But now, the discovery of a cave complex and subterranean tunnels appears to prove a labyrinth existed on the island as well. There hasn't been any proof of a Minotaur yet, and it's not likely that there will be, but it does look like there truly was a labyrinth. The purpose of it, however, is still unknown. Thanks for watching! Which of these amazing islands would you like to visit the most? Let me know in the comments below. Personally, it's Crete for me. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!